Oh, my package is here. Await the door.
Life and death and love and birth and peace and war on the planet Earth. Is there anything? I guess we already know. We've all got something to fear. We've all got nowhere to go. I think you're all insane, but I guess I am too.
One, two, 1, 2. Check. Okay. I think we're good. All right. What is up? We are live Thursday, Quarren stream. Hello. On the webcam today. So today we were going to revisit Ableton, try and figure out well, with some of the research I was doing, maybe the live looping setup that I was looking for may not. I may have to find some ways to adapt. It might be weird. It might be that setup or the setup necessary to achieve what I was thinking of. May take a few more pieces of gear, or at least more things to make it a little bit more I don't know, possible or clean, easy to do, etc. I have to look into it more, but yeah, I was planning on doing that today, but I think we're gonna talk instead, because I don't know. This is a multitude of things that I've been thinking about and taking in. You guys don't know what I'm referring to, so in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there was recently released footage of a man being basically executed from a, I don't know, unauthorized restraining technique by some cop. it was sort of one. It was miraculously bad enough that all the officers involved were immediately fired. But many have been calling for actual criminal trials because he killed somebody. And there are various demonstrations going on in the city and around the country. And I guess, I mean, when these kind of things happen, there's so much information coming in, so many different takes, and so many different perspectives coming in that I don't know. It sometimes it feels pointless to try and like keep track of everything that's happening on the ground. Although it's interesting news, I guess. But it doesn't always have a lot to do with the bigger picture, except for certain elements which tend to be consistent in these cases. I want to talk a little bit more about the connection of these things. Obviously, police violence in marginalized communities, particularly black men, although many other groups are terrorized by law enforcement. The point and the real purpose of law enforcement in America, and what are the things that tell us what those actually are. Because you could say one thing, well, they're there to uphold the law, but what does that mean? What is that? How does that actually play out in the world? This is one example of that, and I want to relate that to a few things. So, I've had a lot of things swimming in my head around the subject. Obviously, again, if you go online or whatever, I don't know what your access point to this information is, but there are certainly a number, as many takes as there are people talking about it. And I don't know. Where do I even start? I think the obvious place is as the police response, and how does this demonstrate what cops are there for? What are they there to do? Is that where I want to start? I don't know. There's so many jumping off points in this circumstance. I mean, somebody's killed, and the response is obviously the next day for a bunch of riot cops to show up with batons and tear gas, ready to agitate crowds of people who are already angry and hurt and demanding justice or anything. And a group of armored Imperial Guards is not really the best face you wanna put forward when you're talking about reconciling and soothing a community who you've injured and hurt with the actions of the institution, which is supposed to provide protection or as the stated purpose of what the police are supposed to do. But it seems they seem ready to fight. The same things happened in many places. We have Ferguson with sort of the start of the whole Black Lives Matter movement. Oh, and I want to talk about all the other, All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter in response to that. I mean, I don't know. It's almost too obvious sometimes what these people actually mean when they say those things. come from these I don't know, these perspectives, these points. But I mean, the obvious connection. So I've been talking about. No, I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a second. So when you see groups of armed protesters screaming and getting in cops' faces, storming, legislative buildings, government buildings, whatever, holding assault rifles like they're pacifiers, screaming about, pandemic hoax and having to wear masks and having to stay indoors and it's tyranny and infringing on our rights. Cops are incredibly stoic, incredibly reserved, and incredibly professional, pacifist. In those scenarios, we've seen that play out over the last few weeks. And of course, many people are now like, well, we see those people, armed people, and yet cops do nothing. And yet, how many stories do you hear of unarmed black people being murdered by police in so many other situations? And then you get this situation again. More and more of these come up. There's not always a hashtag. There's not always a huge news cycle around these things because we don't have this obvious video evidence. For example, Ahmaud Arbery, I believe he was killed like several months ago, but people didn't really talk about it, and his killers weren't actually facing any kind of trial or anything like that until the video surfaced, months later. So, they're the only line of defense really for someone seems to be if they can have someone filming them, but even then it's like it may not save your life. It may just inform people about what has happened to you in officer involved death. But to go back to what I was talking about, so what is the difference in these situations where you have these armed militant protesters who are raging cops' faces? You see videos of these people getting like right up in their faces, being physical with police showing just the utmost restraint. I mean, it's commendable almost. And and you juxtapose that with a situation where one of their own has killed a citizen who's supposed to be under their protection, and then they come out like they're looking for a fight. And I mean the race is the obvious factor, and that is an undeniable factor, but there's a lot more to it, and it speaks to what, for me, I talk about what are the police actually there for? Who are they there for? What are they there to do? What are they protecting, if not citizens in their jurisdiction? And I think in those two examples, there's one key distinction there is that what those people protesting for reopening the markets and reopening the economy is exactly that. They are representing the interests of business, many of them businesses that they own. They're not workers. They are business owners and such like that. And there's been proven connections between some of those protest groups and incredibly wealthy, like Koch brother type donors, like totally astroturfed demonstrations that are totally funded by billionaires. Um, uh, the point being that cops are not necessarily there to protect the citizenry, but they are there to uh, one, enforce our institutions, which are demonstrably unequal, both in terms of race. I mean, we know that these kinds of things, if you're black, they're more likely to happen to you. If you're black versus if you're white, you're going to be incarcerated at higher rates for the same crimes. You're going to be incarcerated for longer periods for the same crimes, and you're not going to be treated the same way in our criminal justice system. You're not going to be treated the same way in an interaction with police, like in terms of like a statistical average. So it's important people think of police not just as some abstract, like, oh, they're good and they protect people and they keep the peace and all that stuff. They are the arm of these institutions, which we know are unequal, and we know further dehumanize and commit violence such as this to marginalized community. And similar to, I mean, the distinction between the military and the police is getting smaller and smaller, because the military is protecting the institutional interests abroad, imperial interests abroad, whether it be the deep state in influencing sovereign governments outside of our borders, influencing their elections, their leadership, or us building relationship with militaries and enforcing our will in different regions. I mean, one perfect example is one key point tying military and the police is our relationship with Israel. We provide Israel with weapons and funding, and they groups in Israel teach our police military tactics. And so the tactics of the military in enforcing imperial interests abroad are then turned on those inside the borders of America using the police. So it's important to first recognize what the police actually there for, and what people mean by all cops are bastards and stuff like that. Like, as individuals, I don't know what is in the heart of any individual law enforcement officer, but I understand what the institutions that they're part of, what their purpose is, or if not, what their effect is on these communities. It is sort of terrorize and and marginalize and enforce the unequal distribution of our the way our institutions are affecting these different groups in our society. And so I asked the question, like, stream title, if not cops, at least on YouTube, is the question is, if not cops, then what? And again, the first thing is to recognize, like, what is actually happening here. What is the structural institutional implications of this kind of thing? And I mean, I'm talking about sort of the COVID examples and putting in the context of this greater pandemic. So in Minneapolis, there is, again, when you're talking about trying to analyze things that are happening on the ground, you kind of have no idea what's really going on at any given moment. And the information that's presented is undoubtedly going to be heavily colored by the whatever lens you're viewing that information from, whatever news source or who's saying, like, if a police department is giving a statement versus this group or the family of somebody affected on the ground, you're going to get a very different story depending on where you're getting it from. And so, I don't know, you see pictures of destruction, videos of looting, and things like that. And honestly, I'll get to that in a second, relating it to a larger structural thing. But I mean, in those instances, like, again, you can't know what's happening, and you also can't understand what these people, what they're feeling, what their intentions are. I mean, in some ways, in these instances, you can look at these people as a group, but as like with cops, as individuals, I have no idea what's going on with any of them in their hearts and their heads. But I want to make clear that unequivocally, the looting from a commercial chain, while it might look scary and violent, it is unequivocally it is a far cry from what institutions do to these communities on like a normal daily basis. I mean, the smart ass kind of response that you might see on Twitter. People are talking, oh no, they're looting in Minneapolis, and then they'll screenshot from an article that said the billionaire class in America has gotten $400 billion richer in the last few weeks or months of this pandemic, while so many other people are losing. And in a way, like that, I want to draw a clear distinction between these two acts, because what that is these large companies and wealthy individuals profiting off of crisis on the scale of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, the damage, property on a city block might be millions, or something like that. It's just incomparable. As well, as people pointed out, I mean, like, these things, these storefronts, property and things like that. I mean, what is the relative value between those and a human life? And those people, maybe they're not making that calculation when they're out there, and you don't even know how many of the people out there demonstrating are even participating in that kind of thing. It's just, and you can't even know what the intentions of people are out there either. I mean, there's video of people passing around with like some who look like a cop cosplaying as Antifa, going around smashing windows in broad daylight. And other protesters getting pissed off at him because they're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're trying to get cops to show up and gas us out, which they did following that. And people ask them, like, are you a cop or whatever? Like, I think people understand in the moment more about what they're doing and what is happening than most outside people looking in can tell just by watching a few videos and listening to a few people's commentary. I mean, I've been watching a little bit of like what Unicorn Riot has been putting out. They've had people like streaming from the ground, various other people streaming from the ground. But again, it's hard to get a sense of the full picture. Um, but yeah, I want to make it clear, like which of these things is more detrimental, and which of these things is legal and or illegal. Um, you know, the looting of a massive store to the tune of a few $1 million or whatever, um, and an illegal activity versus the redistribution of people's wealth and livelihood in the middle of a pandemic going straight to the top, and that is perfectly legal and perfectly signed by government officials and acceptable. But we'll have far longer lasting and farther reaching implications negatively for way more people. But it's totally legal, you know. And so when you think about law enforcement and we think about enforcing law and keeping the peace and things like that, I mean, you have to look at what the peace is and what the status, that is the status quo, that is being enforced and that is being protected. You can't just look at it abstractly as like, oh well, if it's illegal it's bad, and if it's legal it's good. I mean, how many awful things that have been committed in our history have been perfectly legal within the bounds of, the context of whether it be a government or whatever. But yeah, like this is internalized military force, internalized imperial sort of colonial, like conquering force, internalized on the inner citizenry of the country, that instead of being outward toward trying to conquer foreign lands, it's being turned inward. I mean, literally the governor has activated the National Guard in Minnesota. I mean, I don't know. I can't make a clear statement about bugging out. Streams are bugging out. Give me a second. Gotta make sure that this is actually happening. It'd be really unfortunate if it wasn't. I feel like my Twitch is not working. YouTube is fine. Twitch, it says I'm offline. That's not good. Yeah, that's not good. Come on, really? Why is this happening? Sorry, I'm gonna put some tunes on. I figure this out. problem is that so the problem is that I forgot that so my artist name Loc9 I've been using for like 7 years. However, for some reason, there's a bunch of different places where it's been taken. So on a lot of different, on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram, it's Loc9. And so I was putting in somebody else's random Twitch channel that had my similar username. So no one was on that stream. That's unfortunate. Yeah. What was I talking about? I need a refresh. I know I've been kind of like just rambling. I mean, I didn't take notes on this. Hoping to just kind of work out everything that I was thinking about. First, illustrating the connections between military and our police and the tactics they use and what their purpose is. What are they enforcing? What are they protecting, if not citizens? That's the message, right? There, military or police are there to protect you. They sacrifice for your safety, etc. But it's demonstrably arguable in many situations. I think institutionally, like maybe individuals, really what they believe, individual police, individual members of the military, that could be their firmly held conviction and their honest belief as individuals, but as part of institutions, that is not really what they're designed to do. That is not their primary effect, their primary goal. The enforcement of these institutions, which, again, we understand as being unequal. They're the enforcers of our inequality. And I mean, people who are aghast at images of destruction of property, and yet have nothing to say about, the execution of innocent people. You have to analyze, and you have to really look at your understand yourself as complicit in that system, in that relationship of valuing property and capital, and the entrenched unequal relationships in our society versus just people's lives. And so I want to establish that first. It took 40 minutes to get there, but basically where we have to start. But as I was saying, the stream title, I think that's where it got me, because I was looking at YouTube. I was like, wait, Twitch is not working because I didn't link my Twitch. I would link some random person who has my name. 1 second. But again, stream name, If Not Cops. If not cops, then what? Now, it may be true that there needs to be some sort of way to resolve disputes between different groups. Some way to enforce, if I have whatever, or even my life or my belongings or what have you. Someone wants to say that is theirs. How can that be enforced? I think I'm not gonna try to imagine a world in which no one is going to do anything unscrupulous or to try and infringe upon someone else's right to whatever we establish human rights to actually be. But cops are not a one size fits all glove for any issue. And you look at like governments like LA or New York, half their budget is cops, and now we're talking about like how are we going to respond to COVID-19? Let's increase the police budget. It's kind of like saying like yeah, people are dying from lack of health care. People in America where our mortality rates are going up, our life expectancy is going down, we're less educated than other parts of the world, we have greater inequality in the other parts of the world. So what is the solution is to give more money to the military. It's something that we accept for some part. So I mean, I don't know. There's almost like a strange strategic action of, hey, I'm gonna loot and ruin this symbol of a massive corporation in response to the violence from the state enforcers. There's a less obvious connection between those two things than might be on the surface, depending on who you are. But I mean, again, so the first step is to stop treating armed enforcement as a panacea. If we're talking about, I was mentioning COVID, and I've had this discussion. I've kind of gone back and forth. Does closing businesses and in different ways forcing people to stay home because their career field, their industry has been shut down from doing business, etc., by the government, does that help us to control the spread of this virus? Yes. But that is only one part of the solution. You could tell people to stay home, you could force people to stay home, but if you don't provide them the means to feed their families, keep the water and the lights on, stay at home, like literally have the money to continue living in the places that they're living in, then what are you actually making people do? You're making them choose between. There's no choice in that point. And also the choice between when it comes to opening up the market and opening up businesses. Sending workers to die in the field of battle at a target. Is what choice are those people being given? So enforcement and the application of the force of authority is not the end all be all of the solution. You need to actually address what the material issues of these groups are. That is the example of COVID, but it also easily translates to poor, marginalized communities. I mean, when you talk about crime in these communities, I mean, alternative markets and underground activity is going to be encouraged when there is a deficit in opportunity in other areas. So if there's lack of education, a lack of decent steady jobs, a lack of decent nutrition and housing, like you're again, if you can throw all these people in jail, but you're not addressing what the issue is. So how about instead of dumping more money into cops and the military, invest in those pillars of our society that are weak: housing, education, food, water, these things that are necessary for the continued of civilization. You can't just enforce and strong arm and brutalize your way through those problems. That's not what the issues are. The issue is in the distribution of resources. The way our institutions, their goals are out of step with the needs of the communities that they're supposed to be uplifting, protecting, and serving. And yeah, step one is take those resources instead of trying to solve poverty from the barrel of a gun. Take those resources and put them elsewhere. The manpower, the money. We don't need cops to be social workers, healthcare workers, community, whatever, neighborhood watch. Those things should be specialized, and we need to reframe the way we're looking at these issues as something that can't just be policed away. You need to actually put work and money into addressing these issues in the specific way that they need to be addressed, whether it's poverty or otherwise. And communities need to have more. I mean, how in the moment where you see burning buildings and blah 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 and broken glass, like, in what moment did that community have more control over their city and over their lives? In the moment where everything was destroyed and on fire, or before that, people were being killed for no reason by law enforcement? In what situation do they have more control? In what situation are their needs being addressed more? And if rioting and looting is the situation in which their needs are being addressed over, under normal circumstances, then the issue is not the fact that they're doing those things. The issue is the fact that that's the only situation in which they're getting those things. You need to look at what the problems with these communities are, not as you need to solve the community itself is the problem, but what are the issues that the community is facing that can't just be solved with violence? Because the violence is as the enforcement of inequality, is to keep these groups scared, keep them dejected, demoralized. And again, individual cops are not sitting here like scheming like, oh yes, I'm going to bring down the black community in my city by roughing these guys up or shooting somebody or whatever. But effectively, as the institution that they're part of, that's what is happening. So you have to look from those three angles. One, what are they protecting? What are they actually enforcing? Two, where are we better off spending our resources? And three, what are those issues that actually need to be addressed? Not just this what's on the surface of the moment, which is scary, people protesting and things like that. What are they actually? What is not being addressed by institutions that are supposed to be representing them, caring for them, and how can they be addressed? And sending in, marching troops through the town is not going to do it right now. Like the most minimal thing that a lot of when these things happen, obviously in this country it happens a lot more than we're even aware of, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, we don't always have a camera trained on when these things happen. Happen far more often than we can be aware of. My train of thought going um but essentially what is actually being communicated in these situations, the rage and the frustration, because this doesn't happen every time. um as I was saying, yeah. So what are they asking for in this moment? The barest thing that people ask for generally is just, justice, that when these things happen, that the perpetrators of this violence are actually prosecuted, and so many times they're acquitted when it's clearly obvious that, like, the person was murdered by someone whose intended purpose is to protect, the citizens in their jurisdiction. But the issues are so much more. Like, I mean, that's such a minimal thing. Like, yeah, these guys are fired, but somebody died. That's a lot more serious than that. And if these people can't even, I mean, again, like, punitive measures are not the end all be all of solving all of our problems. Like, would it be nice to finally see a cop who murdered some unarmed innocent person face some, face the criminal justice system and have some consequence for their actions? Like, sure, in a sort of vindictive way. I mean, and if that's what communities want and what the victims want, what they think will be better for their community, then can't really argue with that. But you have to really, and what these communities really, what they're expressing with these actions, that there's just this deficit of what our government and these institutions are doing for them. Because it's not just the fact that they're being murdered. It's as I mentioned, with the unequal rates that are demonstrated in the criminal justice system, differing mortality rates, the different variables of, like, if you grow up in this zip code versus this zip code, this is how long you're going to live, this is how much you're going to make, this is the kind of life your kids are going to have. There's all these different factors that go so much deeper than just prosecuting a killer cop. I mean, that's just like the first thing you could do. It goes much deeper than that. But really, I don't know. I wanted to talk about this because, I don't know, when these kind of things happen, like, and these videos come out, like, I don't watch. I almost never watch these videos. Like, maybe a little bit before, like a cop is restraining a guy, or like a cop is training their weapon on somebody. Like, I might watch some moments before, but I don't really. I don't really make it a point to, take in somebody's death on film. That's a little too dark for me. And I don't make it a point to always talk about every single injustice that I observe. If it's not, like, sort of my space or whatever. And I've been sort of taking a step back from a lot of the things that are happening lately and focusing more on stuff that's in my immediate space, just to sort of gain a different perspective on my own life. Um, but I don't know, all these things happening, and then there was also that video. So the murder of Ahmaud Arbery by those random guys who killed him because he was jogging, the murder of George Floyd by those cops, um, are probably pretty prominent in the mainstream news cycle. But I don't know, there may be people who weren't aware of the there was a guy, a black man, who was bird watching in Central Park in New York, and there was a lady who was there with her dog unleashed, which is, against the rules of the park over there. And I guess he was hey, leash your dog, and this lady was like getting in his face because he was recording her, and then she was threatening to literally call the cops, and she made it very clear, like, I'm going to call the cops and tell them an African American man is threatening my life. And she made a point. She got on 911. An African American man is threatening me. An African American man. It's funny she said African American because this lady, she knew what she was doing. She knew that she was trying to commit. She was threatening him with murder by police. The cops come here and they see a crying white woman and they see a scary black man. They're gonna kill you. So get out of my face. And the funny thing is, she's a huge, she's like an East Coast liberal, Democratic donor, donated to like Barack Obama, Pete Buttigieg, and people understand what these institutions do, because it's not just why is it all cops are bastards and not that cop's a bastard? Because it's not just in Minnesota. It's not just in New York. It's not just in Los Angeles. It's the entire country. It is the institution of police in our country. It is not an individual problem. So you can't just look at it that way. You have to look at all these factors, because these people do understand. People will try to deny it, and all lives matter and blue lives matter the shit away. But they get it. They're playing along because they don't want to be on the losing side of the narrative. But they get it. I think they understand. Even if they try to pretend that they don't. But I mean, again, it's funny because that lady was, you could probably imagine, some East Coast liberal who might have, scolded someone for saying all lives matter or whatever, literally threatening to kill someone with the cops. But I mean, that's why, all the things I've talked about, that's why you can't take all this all lives matter, blue lives matter shit seriously. Because that's what are they saying in response to? State execution of someone because of their race? So you can't criticize cops. It's not just one cop. It's not one precinct. It's not one city. It's not one state. It is the institution of policing in our country. And undeniable, that's why it happens in so many different places. So, I mean, I don't know. When you see these people run away, don't take them seriously. But I mean, we got to think about these things too. I put donation links in the description. People have been passing around. Again, when these things happen, people want to throw their money at the problem, and sometimes it can be very helpful. Minnesota Freedom Fund I've seen a bunch of people donating to them. I believe they're paying bail for people who are being arrested in demonstrations in Minneapolis. There's also the blurb on Reclaim the Block and Black Visions on their website, I believe. But it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to vet which organizations are legit and which are just trying to cash in on the moment. But those have been co-signed by various people, and should be legit. There's also the GoFundMe for the family of George Floyd, which they've met their goal. But I mean, if you want to give money directly to the family, but again, yeah, in these situations, be aware of opportunistic third parties try and keep your support more focused. But I want to talk about the bigger picture, because we kind of like with my goal of trying to keep track of all the various horrible things, the horrible response our government and various governments have had to this pandemic, and the fact that rich are getting richer while everyone else is losing out, and whole industries are going to be completely changed. Smaller businesses, individuals are going to get washed out by this pandemic, while the richest and largest are going to come out on top with government subsidies to boot. We have to keep the bigger picture in mind, and to keep some sense of strategy in mind, because the riot is an expression of grief and guilt and pain and anger. It's not necessarily a strategic action. It's these people responding to their government killing them for I want to say no reason, but obviously I've outlined some of the reasons why there is an underlying reason to these things. But if we're looking for what can we do, and how to make a bigger picture change, and how to address these issues, we have to be informed. We have to be analytical. We have to be strategic. And for different people, it might mean different things. Like me, I'm in my house, I'm chilling. From where I am, I'm looking at the contributions that I can make, but we have to understand, like, what do we need to work towards, and also who to listen to. Not necessarily listen to me. I'm kind of just relaying what the affected communities are communicating. I'm trying to tie it all in with my thinking and my strategy on addressing issues across the board. Because again, for me, as I've said, to me everything is politics. Everything is interconnected. A very holistic view of a lot of the issues in our world, a lot of the struggles of marginalized communities. They are often interconnected, and the movers and shakers, those who benefit from the enforcement of inequality, are often the same, even in different situations. So again, why all cops are bastards? Why is Blue Lives Matter bullshit? Because it's not just one cop. It's not just one person being killed. It is institutional these patterns and what the effect of these patterns are. The ones that they benefit, and the communities that bear the brunt of violence and degradation. I think I got through it. Hopefully I was somewhat coherent. Thanks for watching again. Check out the donation links. My channel, streaming Mondays and Thursdays. I'm going back and forth about talking about music and talking about these other things. Launched a new segment every Wednesday. I'm going to be posting a little melody thing on my YouTube, my Instagram. The response yesterday was actually really great. Mostly people talking about my beard, which is funny, but that's cool. A lot of things that I'm learning, a lot of things that I'm trying to practice and get good at, and spinning various plates. So it's nice to have a few consistent things. And again, the stream for me is kind of just what it is. It allows me to speak about whatever I want to, and work on presenting and maybe build an audience of some kind. I mean, we'll see. But yeah, check out those links. Look into the situation. Try to think bigger picture. And I don't know. Try to cut through the noise a little bit. There's gonna be a lot of different perspectives that are gonna be coming through, as often do in these situations, and that's why you need to understand. You need to have some kind of analysis. You need to have some kind of understanding of what your strategy is, and some sense of your relationship with these communities. Like, what side are you on? And then just try to take that from the abstract. Try to take it from the theory and put it into praxis, as some might say. Yeah, it could start with your wallet. It could start with conversations. But now I'll keep an eye on what's happening on the ground and continue thinking about these things. But yeah, everybody stay safe. Thanks for watching. Again, I'll see you on Monday, 3:45 or maybe. Yeah, I was thinking about changing stream times. I don't think so yet.